Hello, biology. This is Mr. McDonald here, and I got your weekly lesson all lined up for you guys. Today we get to talk about energy. All right, so in the past lessons, we reviewed a little bit about the structure of cells. We got into the cell membrane, and then we talked about membrane transport. And one of the types of membrane transport was called active transport that we said required energy. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit more about that energy and get into exactly where that energy comes from. Okay, so we're going to look at it in a bigger scale in terms of your food and the molecular scale in terms of what molecules move that energy and where the energy is. All right, so which brings us to our title slide, ADP, ATP, and cellular respiration. ADP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. All right, so that's what those stand for, but we'll check that out in the following slides. So the first one says, what is ATP? As we previously mentioned, it's where we get energy from. Okay, and we're going to check out how this molecule stores energy, where the energy is actually at in the molecule. Okay, ATP is an abbreviation for adenosine triphosphate. Most of you guys know when you see tri, like a tricycle, it implies that you have three wheels. Okay, so a triphosphate implies that there are three phosphate groups that are attached to this molecule, which we'll check out here in a second. Okay, it's an organic molecule, and here's our first hint as to where the energy is located. The energy is located in high energy phosphate bonds. All right, and again, we'll check that out in the next slide with some pictures. I like pictures, so let's roll out here. All right, so the chemical structure of ATP. Here's our picture. Okay, so we have a nitrogen base, which is adenine, the A part, and we attach that to a pentose or a 5-carbon sugar, which happens to be ribose. And then we get to the really, really important part over here in green. So let me get a marker here. And let's see, I guess I shouldn't circle it in green. I'll circle it in, let's go purple here. Okay, so this is the really important part for what we're talking about. Okay, this is the triphosphate part. Okay, so we have three phosphates here. We have one, or maybe not. There you go. 1, 2, 3. So there's our three phosphates right there. Thus, adenosine triphosphate. And the energy in the adenosine triphosphate is here. It's right there, and it's right there. Those are our high energy bonds. So the important thing to understand is when we look at a molecule like this, these lines represent bonds. And we've learned about different types of bonds. The two big ones that always come to mind are ionic and covalent. But in class, we've also learned about hydrogen bonds. And again, all these lines represent bonds. And what's important for us to understand is bonds are energy. Okay? So when we look at this molecule, all of these straight lines represent energy. All right? Some is a very, very high amount of energy, like these high energy bonds here. Others are not so much energy, like what we have going on over here. All right, but bonds are energy. Again, ionic, covalent, hydrogen bonds, they're energy. Okay, so we store energy right here and right here to use at a later time to do all the things that we need our body to do for us. Everything from chemical reactions to creating nervous impulses to running laps to playing video games. You name it, anything that happens in our body that requires energy uses this molecule. So ATP is very, very important to the processes that happen in our body. Let's see, what am I doing wrong here? Why are we not advancing? All right, so we got three phosphates, a ribose sugar, and the nitrogen base adenine. Okay, so what does ATP do for us? All right, this is where we get energy. All right, so just to kind of clarify what I mean by that, when we talked about the four different macromolecules in chapter 2, We talked about protein, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, and lipids. And I told you guys the function of carbohydrates was to supply our body with energy. And now I'm telling you ATP does it. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, the energy provided for our body by carbohydrates is different because our body can't quite use those to do day-to-day activities. So let's just kind of look at that in terms of a different metaphor or a simile, if you would. When you get paid in the form of a paycheck. You can't go to Roma and buy a pizza with your paycheck. Your paycheck does, however, have monetary value. It's just you can't use it to buy pizza. You can't use it to buy sneakers. You can't use it to buy a dirt bike. You can't use it to do anything. Okay, you got to take it to the bank first. And at the bank, you convert that money. You convert that paycheck to money, whether it's in the form of cash or whether you put it on an ATM card. You now have that same monetary value that was in your check, only in a different form. And ATP is very much the same way. So when you eat carbohydrates like pasta, milk, pretzels, all that stuff has energy, but your body has to convert it into something it can use. And it uses ATP. ATP is the cash. It's the debit card of your body. That's the energy that we can use. Okay, so I just want to clear that up and make sure there's no confusion. All right, so again, there's our high energy bonds. How do we get energy from ATP? Well, what we're going to see, man, like this little graphic shows us, is we got to break those bonds. And when we break a high energy bond, it releases energy for us. All right, so how do we break those bonds? Well, again, we got to reach back to chapter 2 and the process that we learned about that breaks things apart for us. We only ever learned about one. Okay, so by breaking the high energy bonds between the last two phosphate groups, we get energy. All right, and as it says there, hydrolysis, which we learned about before, breaks that bond for us. Again, hydro implies water and lysis implies to break. All right, so hydrolysis is going to break that bond for us. All right, yet another reason why we can only survive about 3 days without water. All right, so again, what's the process called? It's called hydrolysis. We have to add water. And again, this is just another pretty cool graphic showing you how hydrolysis works. All right, so we start with our ATP. There's our water. And you're going to see that the water breaks that hydrogen bond, and that releases energy for us. And that leaves us with two phosphates. So that's our ADP from the title slide, adenosine diphosphate. 2 phosphates. Okay, so again, this is just a pretty cool graphic showing us how hydrolysis works. And again, the important thing is when we break off that phosphate group, we release energy. All right, so again, as we've mentioned many times, everything that happens in our body requires an enzyme. And one of the important things I try to tell you guys that's a little trick to remembering what enzymes are is they always end in ASE. Okay, so this one happens to be called ATPase. We didn't get terribly creative, but we just said ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and again, all enzymes end in ASE. So we added an ASE onto the back of it. So ATPase is the enzyme that makes this happen. So we got this cool graphic going on. So what happens? Okay, so here's our ATP cruising along. Then our enzyme ATPase gets involved. And this little starburst here represents hydrolysis. It's our chemical reaction. We add some water, the enzyme makes this happen, and we cleave off the phosphate. And that gives us adenosine diphosphate, 2 phosphates, and energy from the bond. Okay, so that's what you're seeing happen here. All right, so here we are breaking it off, and now we have energy. Now, the other interesting thing that this implies is it's a cycle, and we can repair ADP. We can add energy and put this guy back on. Okay, and that's what we have going on here. How is ATP remade. And it's really important that we can remake ATP, okay? Because again, this is the only way that our body gets energy. So what we can do is we can reverse the previous process. Again, we need an enzyme. This one's called ATP synthase. Okay, and as we mentioned before, whenever you see synthesis, imply that you're making something. That's what it implies. So if you ever get a job where you are involved in pizza synthesis, you make pizza. If you work in McDonald's, you do Big Mac synthesis. Synthesis implies you build something. So we have ATP, there's the synthesis part, and we have ASE, which means it's an enzyme. So we have an enzyme that builds ATP. All right, so that's what we see going on here in this cycle. All right, so as I mentioned before, ATP, hydrolysis, we break it down and we release energy. And that leaves us with ADP and a phosphate. And then we can add energy to that and remake our ATP. And we can go around in the cycle. And that's what our body does for us. ATPase makes hydrolysis happen. And ATP synthase is the enzyme that allows dehydration synthesis, is what we called it in chapter 2, to remake ATP. All right. When is ATP made by the body? Well, it's done by a process called cellular respiration. All right, which we're going to get into more in our next presentation here. So, just to review, the point of this presentation was to familiarize you guys with ATP, have you understand its function for providing energy, and I want you to understand where the energy is in ATP, and also how we break down ATP, and then how we rebuild that ATP. Okay, so again, if you got questions, please email me, let me know. My office hours are 8 to 10, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or anytime you email me, I'll try to get back to you. So again, let me know, and have a good day. McDonald out.